And on we'll go.
Hello, my name is Tim Jenkin, and I am your host for today's Taking Back Our Economy podcast with the Community Exchange Alliance. We are a learning community with many years of experience in community development and alternative means of exchange, such as sharing, swapping, gifting, bartering, and local community currencies. We believe that by sharing what we have learned and the methods and tools that we have developed along the way, we will motivate others to join us in reducing the disparities caused by society's ever-increasing fixation on the pursuit of money. Today, the other founders of the Community Exchange Alliance, Anitha Beberg, Christine Gray, Edgar Cahn, and I are joined by Tom Greco. And this is from your website, Tom. Tom is a preeminent scholar, author, educator, and community economist who, for more than 35 years, has been working at the leading edge of transformational restructuring. He is widely regarded as a leading authority on moneyless exchange systems, community currencies, financial innovation, and community economic development, and is a sought-after speaker internationally. So thank you, Tom, for joining us today. Let's start by hearing from you about the role of alternative means of exchange in our present troubled times. We hear a lot of talk about a great reset. We have seen the devastation caused by lockdowns and economies put on hold. We hear about single global currencies, about social credit schemes, the destruction of small businesses and the collapse of the middle class, and many similar scary phenomena. The old normal that was not so great, but neither is the new normal that seems to be hovering over humanity. The world we knew and understood is under threat, but I know you will agree that a crisis brings danger, but also opportunities. Let's hear what you have to say about that.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I'm delighted to be with you today and reconnect with old friends and people that have been laboring in this field for so many years as I have. We are at a very important juncture in civilizational history. As you point out, there are both crises and opportunities that are facing us right now. And with this latest pandemic and government responses to it, it's made it ever more urgent that we go to work in creating and deploying alternative exchange systems and alternatives in many realms. The basic necessity is for us to devolve power to community level. Power has become overly centralized, wealth has become overly concentrated. We are on the verge of sliding into a global fascist neo-feudal empire, and it's the big brother system that Orwell warned against and Aldous Huxley warned against in Brave New World. And so, I've seen this coming for a long time. Many others have too. Many people are still in denial about it and going along with the official demands. But this is the time for people to step up and to assert themselves in saying that we're not going to stand for that kind of a global system. We're going to take back our power, and we're going to do what needs to be done in order to create the kind of world that we want to live in. And for me, that world is a peaceful, harmonious world in which we will have power to control our own lives, personal freedom within our communities, to do what's best for us with due attention to what we need to do in collaboration with others around the world to create this kind of harmonious global society that we want. I started out more than 40 years ago trying to answer specific questions about why we have continual wars and conflicts around the world, why people are starving in the midst of plenty, why we can't provide a dignified life for everyone in the world. We didn't create this world. Humans are just part of the whole fabric of life, and we are embedded within nature, and we have to be in harmony with nature. We have gone too far in the direction of egotistical domination of nature, which in the long run is going to cause our own destruction. So we have to find harmonious ways of living on this planet. To me, that means taking control in our local communities, reducing the levels of complexity in all of our systems, and not allowing wealth and power to be so concentrated. So, I've been working at this for 40 years. I long ago realized that the key instrument that is used to centralize power and concentrate wealth is control of the money and banking system. And when I talk about money, basically what I mean is control of credit, because in the modern world, credit has always been the basic form of payment. And this credit is created on the basis of something real. With the abuses in the current system, it's often created by fiat on the basis of nothing but the power of those in control to create it, as we've seen over the last year with these massive amounts of government money being printed, not actually printed. That's not how money is created. It's the same effect of creating money as bank deposits and then spreading that around, mostly to large corporations and favored interests. And they throw a few crumbs to the small, medium-sized businesses and the people at large. This also serves the purpose of centralized power because it makes people ever more dependent on the government for handouts, and we become basically pets to the power elite, and they give us enough to subsist and participate in their system and keep it going. 40 years ago, I started writing about this. My first book out of the 4 that I've written was called Money and Debt, A Solution to the Global Crisis. I had by that time spent a few years already in investigating the nature of the existing money system and what the dysfunctions and destructive aspects of it happened to be. And that first book was an enumeration of those problems and an outline of the direction that we needed to go to solve the problem. The objective has always been the ultimate replacement of that destructive system. Now, we have to start out somewhere, and of course, that somewhere means living in 2 worlds where we create alternatives that we deploy that have to operate in parallel with the dominant system. You can't change things overnight. It's a thing that takes time. Unfortunately, it's taken more time than I expected. 40 years later, we're still at a point where the global system is gaining ever more power, and we're becoming ever closer to this dystopia that I described earlier. But the opportunity here is that people are now beginning to pay more attention. I have more requests for information now than I ever did, even though my last book, the 4th book, The End of Money and the Future of Civilization, was published about 12 years ago now. It's just as timely now as it was then, perhaps more so, because in that book I gave a historical outline, a theoretical description of the principles that need to be followed. Also, the second half of the book is prescriptive in how to create systems that can actually scale and carry some heavy freight in terms of economic exchange. So that's basically an overview of where I'm at and what I think is happening and what needs to be done. So if you have specific questions, I'll try to address them. The Great Reset, as Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum puts it. We have the Great Divide, which was already developing in this country. So I think it's a great divide in many respects. And I think the media and many politicians are trying to fan the flames of racial and ethnic divisions as a way of divide and conquer, which has always been a winning strategy for power elites. We have a great asset grabs. I've read that Bill Gates now owns about 50% of the farmland in the United States. As I said before, it seems like most of the government handouts are going to large corporations, which allows them to grab up more and more of the real assets. The people, the pension funds, are going to be left with financial assets, which will eventually prove to be valueless, especially those that are fixed denomination. Well, I could go on and on. There's so many different aspects to this where this concentration of power and wealth has kicked into high gear.
Well, what can a layperson like me or anyone else do about this situation? I mean, if it's all the powers up there, what can we do other than mobilize? And
Well, we have to first of all consider what we can do individually, what we can do in community, and I think that's where we have to begin. Individually, we can stop supporting the megastructures that are making us ever more dependent, are basically stealing our energy and our wealth. I've written a series of articles called Walking Away. That's the title of my article series. So we're seeing more and more people walk away, is refuse to do anything that's going to exacerbate the problem. In my own life, I left academia more than 40 years ago. Not that I was doing bad work, but I felt that I was called to do something different, something more important. Prior to that, I had worked in the defense industry, actually the weapons industry, and I made a decision long ago that I would not do that anymore. I would not build weapons. I would not contribute to the military industrial complex and their further empowerment. And yeah, the author, Daniel Quinn, he wrote on how civilizations decline and end. And he gives some examples uh, from the Americas, in Mesoamerica, civilizations that mysteriously disappeared. And his argument was that people just withdrew, they walked away. So my series of articles that I wrote about this, called Walking Away, I sort of elaborate on those points. And I think basically that's what we're going to have to do in the current situation. Western civilization has reached the point of over-centralization of power and over-concentration of wealth. For the last dozen years or more, I've been talking about the emergence of the butterfly society. And I think this is an apt metaphor of the transformation or the metamorphosis from the caterpillar to the butterfly. The caterpillar, basically its purpose is to accumulate resources. One thing we observe in nature is its cyclical nature. There are cycles in every realm, and some are short cycles, some are long cycles, but there's no reason to believe that there are exceptions to this. So I think we're emerging into the chrysalis stage, where the old civilization is breaking down. The imaginal cells, which we may be part of, are forming together into communities and beginning to create new structures to take care of the essential functions that need to be taken care of. Now, the essential function of money, of course, is exchange. It's a way of providing for the facile exchange of value in the marketplace. Now, among the problems that we have with the existing system is that the power hierarchy is able to control and dominate markets. So, free market capitalism doesn't exist. What we have is companies becoming ever larger and more dominant in their markets. They're able to dominate both the markets in which they sell and the markets in which they buy. And we had, for a brief period of time, a bounce that John Kenneth Galbraith talked about, countervailing power. One of his books that I read many years ago was The Theory of Countervailing Power. That was the subtitle, in which he talked about government, corporations, and labor actually being three legs of a stool that balanced each other out. But that was in the days of big labor, when labor had unionized to a large extent and was able to exert some power. But over the last 40 years especially, we've seen this disintegration of the labor movement and the destruction of unions across the world. They still exist, but they don't have nearly as much power as they once did. So collectively, what we need to do is to begin to organize together in communities where we take charge and assert our own, refuse to participate in the destructive systems and create new systems. And my particular interest, of course, as you know, is along with you, systems of exchange of value. So when I first arrived in Tucson, there was already a LET system that had started just a few months earlier. A man who EPA, he had read an article that I co-authored with Michael Linton that appeared in the Whole Earth Review. And this was all about the LET system and how LET systems work. And he thought it was a good idea, so he started one up. So when I arrived on the scene, I helped out with the management of it. It never reached more than about 40 or 45 members. And there was a decided lack of business interest or business participation in it. So after 2 or 3 years, it just sort of disappeared, dissipated. Then in the mid-90s, some people came to me and wanted to start an alternative exchange system or local currency here. So I agreed to advise them. I said I wouldn't be part of the management, but I would try to guide their efforts and make sure they didn't fall into the pitfalls that previous attempts had fallen into. So they started an organization called Tucson Traders, and we had a unit of currency called Tucson Tokens. It was basically a LET system. And there was a lot more enthusiasm. We had a newsletter that had, before it ended, about, I think, 3 issues. We had a directory of skills and offerings and wants. We had a few actual small businesses involved in it. And we got up to about 200 members at the peak. It was volunteer run. And of course, volunteers eventually burn out. So we went through a couple of changes of volunteer management. And then we decided that in order to reduce the record-keeping burden on the volunteer management, we would issue paper currency. So we would allow people to draw paper currency against their line of credit. So if you had a $200 or 200 token line of credit, you could draw against that up to 200 paper tokens, and then just circulate the token paper hand to hand, which relieved us of the need to keep a record of every transaction on the ledger. But again, that eventually petered out. We didn't have enough business involvement to really bring it to scale. So this is the key point that I want to make, is that in our new efforts to create exchange systems that can scale and be a significant part of the economy and eventually replace the dominant system of money, we need to make sure that it's business-based. Small and medium-sized businesses need to be our target audience for education, and they need to be the ones that adopt it to save their own skin. Because without it, they're going to go by the wayside. In organizing our communities, we have to bring businesses into our discussions. And I've recently joined a local initiative here in Tucson of people that are now trying to make connections with local small farmers. So this is the first step, is to make those connections with small farmers. The next is to make them aware of one another so that they can support one another. The next step after that is for us to form group buying clubs so that we can provide a market for those growers, and reduce the inefficiencies of having them come to the few farmers markets that exist and everybody go to the market, Well, instead of that, we want to have the market come to us. There is an initiative that I found out about in 2009 when I was invited to New Zealand to give a keynote speech to the local currency groups there. There was somebody there who was starting an organization or an effort called UBI, out of our own backyard, which was promoting the process of urban agriculture and local gardening. And what they wanted to do, and actually did do, was to collect produce from local growers and distribute it to people that signed up to buy it. This has now spread to Australia and the UK, and it's been very successful. In the UK, they call them box schemes. So as a consumer, I would sign up to have a box delivered every week or every other week, and I would specify the kinds of produce that I wanted, and I would pay a certain amount for that. So I would be supporting the local farmers, and I would be getting the kind of food that I want, nutritious, local, perhaps organic food to put on my table and feed my family. So then the next step after that will be to organize other small and medium-sized businesses in the community to participate in a credit clearing exchange. So the farmers could form the foundation for this exchange. They would be the anchor producers of value, and we monetize the value of their produce by allowing them to issue a currency on the basis of what they produce. So this is a process called monetization. So we would monetize the value of produce in the form of a local currency or credits within a credit clearing exchange. Then we get the other businesses in the local community to accept these credits or participate in this credit clearing exchange. And then we start to create this virtuous circle where we begin to monetize more of the local value added and become less dependent on the dominant money system. And this is basically the process that I see of gaining greater power for ourselves and our local communities, greater independence from the destructive systems that are going in the wrong direction, and eventually the emergence of the butterfly society and the butterfly economy.
I think that I commend to you another group that is likely to be with us for a while called Aging, and that the need for informal care, informal support, but also the need to redefine their role from supplicants and consumers to contributors may offer another opportunity, and it would be wonderful to think that through with you, because the health professions will be consuming more and more of the monetary economy, but they also will provide the funding for the infrastructure, because the damn infrastructure costs so much to maintain in order to enable those transactions to keep flowing. So that would be, and it would be wonderful to find ways in which we could partner. But I think there's now exciting neurological evidence that engagement reduces dementia, reduces decline, and that to the extent that we can produce engaged roles for seniors, they can be. That's all time banking has always been looking for. Where can we create those support systems that are informal?
Yeah, I would like to make those connections. I applaud your efforts also creating the time banking movement. It's been a great community building tool. And I think we all need to find common ground and come to some convergence with these efforts.
Tom, that's what the Community Exchange Alliance is for, that all of these, we're very like-minded similar missions to come together and actually make progress. And so we welcome you.
Yeah, well,
And
you know,
applaud each other's efforts too. It's not about who's better. It's about we're all affirm and we all go back to basic principles.
yeah, right, right. Yeah, we have to harmonize what we're doing so that it makes sense and so that it helps the overall effort. But yeah, I think there's a tremendous resource amongst people in my age group and yours.
There's an alternative, Tom, to harmonizing the progressive efforts. It's much easier, I think, if we harmonize the indictment of the system. because to the extent that we can heighten your analysis and your history can heighten awareness of why going in one direction doesn't get us where we want to go and what the consequences of that are, the more there's a willingness at least to work on the good side.
Yeah, well, as I said, I've tried to point out the flaws and the dysfunctions inherent in the existing system. I don't think we have to do battle with anybody. We just have to assert our own power to do what's right for us, for ourselves and our communities. We will find resistance, of course, and we need to stand fast against it. But getting back to persistence, yeah, I'm an optimist. You know, I sometimes get discouraged, but I know that I have to persist in what I'm doing because I think it's the right thing to do. Just to underline the fact that we need to persist. Ultimately, we will win.
Tom, we've been running the community exchange system for about 18 years now, and we've seen ups and downs. In 2008, we saw a massive uptick in the number of groups registering, and we're seeing the same thing now. Huge numbers just about every day. I'm creating a new exchange group, most of them in Spain or South America. And one thing that we've come to realize over the years is that there are many ways, different ways to exchange things. In the beginning, we just focused on sort of super lets, you know, kind of mutual credit stuff. Then over time, we realized that time banking was not really very much different. For us, the only difference was that the sort of unit of account or value is time instead of your national currency, but otherwise pretty much the same thing. And then we discovered all kinds of other ways. You know, barter, they told us in the economics class, was not something that's viable because you have to have this duality of wants and things. What do they call it? Double coincidence of wants. But that's absolute nonsense, because once you introduce the time factor into bartering and you simply keep a record of who gave what, then bartering becomes a very viable thing. And we know that countries barter with each other. Yeah, and then we discovered, you know, Let's has a sort of public ledger, so everybody's transactions are recorded on a central place. But you can also have private ledgers. So between you and I, we can be doing things for each other and simply recording the value of what we do. And you do a lot of things for me, and it goes up for you and down for me. And then I start doing things for you and so on. And then swapping and gifting and all kinds of, there's so many different ways that one can exchange. And so we've sort of opened up our system like that. Instead of trying to push one thing, we're even looking at crypto, but as you said, crypto is really about store of value, and we see it being used for speculation. But there are some systems that seem to be honest and do seem to work in the field that we're working in. Then there are some kinds of paper currencies, as you explained with your Tucson. If it's sort of backed by the credit line that you have, or the credit that you've earned and is registered on the central ledger, then you can draw paper currency against that, and some of the groups do that. So there are many different ways, when you're exchanging with people that you know and there's huge trust, you don't even really need to keep records because you just kind of remember, and it doesn't really matter if it doesn't balance out. And then there's, trading between companies is different to trading between individuals. And then there's countries or regions or towns trading with others. So there are many different ways. And I think for us, that has been our focus really, is to not focus, is to try and diversify all these different exchange methods and offer them. And because we don't really want to create another monopolistic centralized system just to replace the bad old one. So not some super kind of mutual credit system that's all filled with rules and it's all computerized and everything is monitored and it works just like the financial system. So, as you point out, if you can keep trade and exchange in your local community, the focus is to decentralize everything and to really create an ecosystem of exchange methods. I think that's really where our focus should be and not on any one particular thing. So, yeah, I don't know, what's your comment on that?
Well, Tim, I applaud your efforts in providing this free platform for all kinds of exchange systems. And I think, you've provided an opportunity for people to experience different kinds of systems and to see what works and what doesn't. And I'm sure you've learned a lot about that as well. When it comes to networking systems together, and you're trying to network different systems together, then you have a whole different set of problems that you need to deal with. But going back to ways of exchanging, in my lectures, my presentations, I always point out that there are three ways that economic value can change hands. One is the gift exchange, which isn't really an exchange. It's just I give you something and I don't expect anything in return. Another is the coerced exchange, where we can think about theft, burglary, robbery, extortion, taxes to a large extent, where you have no choice or you have a difficult choice. And the third realm, which is by far the largest one, is reciprocal exchange, where you expect to get as much as you give and give as much as you get. So within close-knit communities, it's better not to keep score. You just do it casually. You give help when it's needed and you accept help when you need help. And, people have an informal way of keeping track of who's the biggest provider of help, who's not there when you need them. The Amish provide a good example of this. They help one another routinely. I just reread an article called Amish Economics that I discovered in a reprint that was stored away in my archives. Anyway, they put together a barn that had been destroyed in a storm in a matter of 6 weeks. And a regular contractor who had been observing this said, it would have taken us 6 months to do it. So the reciprocal exchange, however, follows certain principles. When you allocate a line of credit in a let's system, you're not making any judgment about anybody's personal worth. What you're trying to assess is the amount of value that that person is making available to the community. In monetary terms, we talk about this as monetizing the value of the goods or services that you bring to the party. Now, you can imagine a trading fair in medieval times where people came from miles around or different countries even, with their wares to trade. And these were occasional events. People didn't necessarily know each other, and they didn't pay for every single purchase with gold or silver coins. They just keep a record of purchases and sales and then settled up the differences on this clearing process at the end of the fair. So, that's the way a credit clearing exchange has to be structured. You assign credit lines on the basis of the amount of value that each account brings and offers to the community. So if you got one person who runs a computer shop and they're able to offer $20,000 worth of computer equipment a month, you might give them a $40,000 or $50,000 credit line, which means that they can spend that much before they even earn a penny. On the other hand, if you have another account, a person that does some casual trading once in a while, maybe not in business, but they have some stuff in their closet that they're willing to sell that they estimate might be worth about $150. Well, either you don't give them a line of credit or you give them a line of credit of $150, depending on how quickly they are willing and able to provide those goods to the community. That's a stumbling block that a lot of innovators in the sphere fall over. They say, well, everybody's equal, everybody should have the same line of credit, and the same mistakes get made over and over again. Most notably, the person that started the TEM system in Volos, Greece, I met him at an event in the island of Crete in 2012. And we've since become good friends. He invited me and Sergio Lube, one of my associates, to come to Volos after that gathering on Crete was finished. And so we went and we observed what they were doing in Volos. And at the beginning, basically it was a let's system. They invited people to join the let's system, and they kept the ledger on a computer, as was the usual case. And they allocated 300 euros worth of credit to every single account. Well, as you can imagine, people with a lot of enthusiasm came to the marketplace that they had set up, and people were taking advantage of their lines of credit and gobbling up all the good stuff. And once the good stuff was gone, and people had spent their line of credit, a lot of them never reciprocated. So, they ended up with big debit balances that never got cleared. As this was happening, the people that were running the system realized that, oh, we've allocated too big a line of credit here. So they reduced it, but it was too late by then. And now it's gone defunct, just like so many others.
Yeah, it's a familiar story, We've had the same same experience. Started out with a big line of credit and then had to reduce it. But we found over time, a lot of people also earn a lot of credits, and they also leave the system, so they do tend to balance out in the end.
Really?
Yeah, it does. Overall, the system seems to balance. Anyway, we're coming towards the end of our session. I don't know if some of the others would like to
He has a
make
question.
a final comment. Christine, I don't know if you want to say anything.
I would like to say something. So I'm reading a very, very interesting book right now. It's called The Theology of Money. I don't know if you've come across this, by Philip Goodchild.
Have not.
It's a very, very interesting book. And it's he's actually a philosopher. He's trying to grapple with the somewhat mysterious aspects of money, and how it works through our systems and how we project onto it and all of those kinds of things. But one of his central points, but one of the things that he stresses is a fundamental issue is how we value things, and that the market works in a certain way to value things, to which we are we have very little control over, actually, and that it's often distorted kinds of values. And as you were talking about the $20,000 worth of computer equipment or services versus the $150 worth supposedly of clothing or whatever somebody decided to, in a way, what it seems to me, just sort of alerted by this book, is what you're piggybacking on is a system of values already established by the market economy. And that as long as you're actually piggybacking on that system of values, us will remain entrapped by the system that actually establishes and creates those values. So it's a dilemma. And I wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
Yes, of course. I try to deal with what is. And what is what people value individually. The market, if it's a free market, just is a manifestation of a consensus about what people value and how much they value it.
You have just said, though, if I could interrupt for a moment, you have just said that it's not a free market, that in fact power comes into play. We don't have free markets. Actually, what we have is a very, very deeply skewed market, which is propped up by politics and power players. So the system that we have is what it is, but it's not reflective of the valuations that we would probably like to give to it.
Yeah, well, that's why I say we've got to claim our power and restructure the systems so that we do have free markets, so that we do have control.
What my suggestion is I do think, no, I mean, I think that what we're doing here actually is a very important part of the suggestion, which is that we do the very, very, very difficult task of actually seeing what is in its complexity and having conversations about what is and trying out alternatives, as you were doing and Tim has been doing all of these years, and doing a sort of deep dive of understanding. And I know that not everybody can do that, and not everybody will want to do that. But I think that has to be a part of the very vital work that has to be done, is that we're operating on these different levels. One is the level of evaluating, understanding, interrogating. There's a book by Bollier, so Free, Fair and Alive, which is attempting to make a new language for us, a new lexicon. And I think that this work is just as important as actually going and trying out practical ways of using exchange systems.
Sure, well, changing people's minds is a difficult thing. You know, we've all been immersed in a cultural milieu that has shaped our values, attitudes, and beliefs. And we live in a very materialistic society, and we are, by and large, very materialistic, and we have to get beyond that. You know, we're going through a sort of a discussion here in Tucson. The Tucson Zoo wants to take over a big chunk of a very popular park that has been free and open. So they want to enclose it and then charge people admission so they can see the tigers. Well, I personally don't give a damn about the zoo. I like the park the way it is. And the people that are favoring the zoo expansion, they think that they can just freely grab this piece of land that people love. It's got a pond and a hill and lots of mature trees, and they want to take that all out in order to expand the zoo. And it's been a big uproar. And there are alternatives. There are other parts that they could expand into, but they would cost more. So the administration, the city administration, looks at this from a monetary and an economic point of view. They want the least expensive alternative because they don't value the park portion that people want to preserve, that they've had open access to. So yes, we got to straighten out our values, our attitudes and beliefs. But we also have to talk about working at the structural level. And this is where I've focused my attention, is on restructuring systems to provide the kind of outcomes that we want, which is basically devolution of power to the community level and local control of credit. But I think it's possible for us to have a decentralized system where credit is locally controlled but globally useful. But there are certain principles that you need to be aware of and certain procedures and protocols that need to be followed in networking these local exchanges together into a global network of computers. Of course, that's gotten away from us. That's taken over money and banking and the economy. I was just trying to point out that what we need to create are systems and structures that are locally controlled but globally useful, particularly credit systems. What I envision is small local credit clearing exchanges where people do business with one another on a regular basis and are personally known to one another. It's not an anonymous system. You have to know somebody in order to come into a local exchange. And so the local exchange will allocate credit according to some agreed procedure and protocol and manage that credit, but then network together on the basis of this agreement so that we can have a system where I can still go to the UK or Europe and use my local credit to pay for what I need there.
It's fascinating because the question of valuation, you've sort of put it outside of the systems that you're creating and saying, well, that's just values and I'm dealing with structure. So this is a kind of machine-like money as a machine, local currencies as a machine. But in fact, values and valuation are totally woven into the nature of the currencies themselves, as you know. And so a big part, I think, of what we're all trying to do is sort of not just revalue the machinery of money, but how we do see value, how we do create value, how we respond, as it were, to the value of home, neighborhood, and community that is being squeezed out by the monetary system, for example.
That's why we have to have a different monetary system.
Yes, but what I guess I'm saying is that taking account of values and how we value is an intrinsic part of that process.
I've got a question. How would replacing the current monetary system with another monetary system really actually make a difference?
Well, the locus of control would shift.
But then a new group would have power and it could lead to the same things.
Well, it's the same with government. We think we live in a democracy, but we don't. So, human nature is evolving. I don't believe that human nature is fixed. We are evolving, and our systems evolve along with us. And, that's why I say that we need to take back our power. We need to take control. But we will have only as much freedom as we take responsibility for. You often hear, oh, I don't want to know, or I can't do anything about that. Well, if you're not going to take responsibility, somebody else is going to do it, and you probably won't like the outcome. So freedom and responsibility go together. And as far as values are concerned, my values have changed a lot. My attitudes when I was young were a lot different from what they are now. But that's my life experience has caused me to learn and to go through those changes. All I can do is share what I think I know, what I've learned, and what I think needs to be done. And the rest is up to God and to others to decide for themselves.
Okay, I think we need to wrap up here. Anitha, I don't know if you want to have a last word. And
well, Martin hasn't said anything, so.
Want to say something?
Yeah, I just was finishing about, I am a proponent of a local community currency. I'm not a proponent of someone wanting to create another largely, the same, like reinventing the wheel. Instead of the Federal Reserve printing money, we print our own money. I think that keeping it local and having our local communities have that power is a better way to proceed if we want to create an alternative currency.
Okay, let me just say something about that.
Okay.
If all you have is local currencies, what do you do when you go outside your local community? How do you get what you need when you're not in your local community?
I think we've done that already. I mean, our communities are locally based and the focus is local, but I can travel anywhere in the world and use the system, and I've done that. I've been in Australia and had all my accommodation there, and I used my credits that I earned in Cape Town. So you can do it, and it does work, and it's all there.
Okay, how do we scale that up?
What Tom is saying.
How do we scale that up so everyone can do it?
We're
Well,
doing
they can,
that.
but you've got to have a local exchange wherever you are. And if there's an exchange where you are, you're just part of this broader network, automatically built into the system.
I'd just like to talk about another way that we've been going in the UK, particularly in Gloucestershire, and it's a local initiative that's I've been involved with for 40 years, mainly community building. But then we have time banking. The first time bank opened in Gloucestershire. But what we found, we were always needed to put more resources into building the community. Connections don't happen by themselves these days. They're not like they used to. People need encouragement. They almost need permission to talk to their neighbors. It's so bad. The authorities say, you know, be wary. They might be, you know, goodness knows what. No, don't trust each other and all that sort of stuff. But what we did then was realize that to provide the money for the community work, we needed our own money. I didn't see that people have a real desire for something beyond capitalism. I've got many friends who've got that desire, but when I look in the streets where we work, capitalism does well. People like their iPhones, they like what they're getting out of it. And this is talking about people in the most disadvantaged areas as well. But so we came across the idea of setting up our own social enterprise, which was a motorway services station, which we built. It took 12 years, but the idea came from the local estates. It now gives us about £500,000 in profit that we put into each year, which we put into a charitable trust, which employs the community workers and pays for the time bank. And for me, that was the most pragmatic way forward, and it's working. But it's, as you said earlier, it's local. We've been here 40 years to build up that trust, and 12 years of hard work to get there. But I don't think power is going to be devolved. I think we've got to take it. And we're taking it by using our own money, but using their money or our money. It's all our money, but well, it's not, is it? It's the bank's money. But it is an alternative that I like to see encouraged. So I just wanted to chip in with that piece.
It's quite beautiful and lovely. It's a wonderful place. It has a sense of community in it. Mm-hmm. And it is a beautiful, I guess, mediating enterprise between your local economic systems and the global ones. It does a beautiful job of translating resources from one to the other.
Yeah. Well, basically, you're creating value locally under local control.
Under local control.
Yeah, that's what we need to do more of. But you know, we already have a lot of that taking place, and we need to organize the producers, the local producers that already exist.
But again, what's absolutely crucial to that enterprise is that it's interfacing with the larger system, motorists who are driving through and putting their money into the system. So yes, it is creating value locally, but it's doing so by interfacing with the larger economy.
Yes, of course, you can't avoid that.
The biggest bonus for it is local jobs as well. There's 400 jobs we've created, local people. That's the number one.
Excellent.
Okay, everybody, thank you very much for your contributions. I think we must call this to an end now. Please check us out at www.communityexchangealliance.org or on Twitter at _exchange. And you can partner with us as an individual, a network, a platform, or a community. Thank you all once again.
No, I don't wanna waste what's left. And on we'll go through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays.